Hey, so a lot of people have knee challenges these days, and I'm going to go through a really short, simple routine for you. All right. One of the first things that I do when my knees are hurting is I roll out my feet. I take care of my feet. That's your foundation. So let's roll out our feet. You don't have to use this kind of ball. Do put a hand on the wall and look in front of you. If you have instability in your pelvis, you can actually use a belt or a strap, tie it around your pelvis, and that'll give you a little more awareness. So when you're rolling one foot, the other foot is your foundation. So be conscious of that. It is tempting to look down at the foot that you're rolling, but as much as possible, just keep a hand on the wall and look on your horizon line. Of course, you can check if you're not sure, but use sensation as your guide for rolling. Keep it gentle. I start off really gentle and a more rapid movement to get all over and warm up the sole of my foot and just kind of be aware of that fascia, the connective tissue that's right under the skin there. All right. And then if you want to get into like your arch or the bottom of your arch where your heel is, you can. And then the top of your arch where the ball of your foot is, you can. And then your inner and outer arch. You can also get into your toes a little. Just depends how much time you have. So if you're once you're ready to do the other side, then go ahead and do that. Roll it out. Again, it's really tempting to be looking down, but as much as possible, we want to prioritize axial extension. Your ears are somewhere above your hips, above the standing heel. Nothing that I suggest is ever meant to diagnose anything. And if you're having really intense, acute, or chronic pain, it's good to have a medical professional, of course, diagnose. These are just some yoga and somatic practices that I have found to be helpful with my knees. All right. So after I've rolled out, you can notice the difference in your feet. Maybe there's more buoyancy. You're going to come lying down. So lying on your back, you can have a block or you can use a cushion. You can use a pillow instead. You take that block right between your thighs and adjust your feet so they feel like they're lined up with your hip bones. Pause here for a moment, spread your toes, and gently hug that block. Gently. So you can feel your inner thighs activating together towards the midline, towards the center. We don't want to hug so much that we feel pain in our pelvis anywhere. And wag your head a little. Make sure your shoulders feel comfortable. Just put your hands wherever they're going to support comfort and ease in your shoulders. Spread out your toes and press into your whole foot, both feet evenly as you hug that block. And lift your hips just any amount and then lower back down and start to link this with breaths. You can exhale up and inhale down. All right. And the next time you come up, stay up and hug your heels in the direction of your shoulders. So heels towards shoulders, hug the block gently and then lower. And if you got hamstring cramps, you can pause, you can take your legs up. So we'll do it a few more times, but you can always fast forward through this part if you want to do fewer, or you can pause to do more of these. I wouldn't overdo it. That's important. Then we'll take out the block. So if you have a strap, choose a foot and take the strap around your foot. I am just going to hold behind my leg just in case you don't have a strap. You could use a scarf or something, but I'm going to hold behind my leg and stretch the hamstring, stretch the back of my leg. The other leg can either stay bent or you can open up the front of your hip by extending your leg along the floor, just any amount without overdoing it. So your 2 feet move in opposite directions. And it doesn't really matter what this looks like, but where you feel it. So ideally, you're going to feel it in between the bottom of your butt and your knee, not in either of those places, but right in the middle. That's where we want to get into those hamstrings. And then we're going to keep our hips down and take this foot across the midline to get into that outer thigh, iliotibial band. And it may be that you feel this in your outer ankle, outer calf, outer knee, or outer thigh. All of those are fine. What we're not doing is taking it into a twist. So we're not twisting our spine. We're keeping that hip down and taking the foot across. Now, doing this with a strap is a little more helpful because then it's less hamstring and more of that outer thigh. And you can experiment with it and play around with it. All right, so we'll reverse. And before we do the other side, just both feet down, separate your feet, drop your knees in towards each other and pause. And you'll notice there's a little instability probably in your pelvis because you've done the stretching on one side and not the other. You can do some windshield wipers here. And when you feel ready, we'll do the hamstring stretch on the other side. So bring that knee in. And again, you could take the strap around anywhere along your foot, or you can hold behind your leg. And then your bottom leg can either stay bent, or if you want, slowly slide it out. And it may not stretch out all the way, and that's fine. We're not forcing it. Seeing where you feel the hamstring stretch. It's also a great place to circle your feet on your ankles. I'm going to do it on both sides since I didn't do it on the other side. Okay. Both feet. Keeping your shoulders broad and relaxed. That's why the strap is really helpful. And remembering the belly of the hamstrings is where we want to feel the stretch. Right. And then you can take it into that iliotibial band stretch, so the outer leg stretch, keeping your hip down and taking your foot across the midline. If your bottom knee was bent, it would feel like you're crossing your thighs. So there are a number of places you might feel this. I often feel it in my outer calves. You might be feeling it here. And we're keeping that hip down, taking the foot across the midline. All right, reverse out. Let's bend both knees, pause. Notice the two sides of your pelvis. Separate your feet, drop your knees in towards each other, back to your constructive rest. And then you can sway your knees side to side. Now, you might want to pause on one side. We'll get an external rotation in one thigh. You can always put a block under one leg, either one. And then the other thigh, you're getting internal rotation and a little quad stretch from your knee through the front of your hip. You might be feeling something there. And if you squeeze the internally rotated leg, if you squeeze your butt cheek a little bit, activate your glutes, you might be able to stretch the front of that hip a little more. Same thing on the other side. So a couple windshield wipers and then pause on the other side. So two things happening, a different thing on each leg. And we don't want to stretch so much that the knee hurts. Right? So back off until there's not any pain. So on this side, because my right knee is the one that is injured, when I internally rotate it, I feel a little pulling. And so I back off from there. I don't go into that pain. And then you can squeeze your butt cheek if you want to and think of your knee lengthening away from your shoulder. This is within your comfort zone. All right. And we'll do some clamshells. So It's important, it's valuable to take your time setting up. Your spine is long, your knees are in front, feet stay together, and keeping your hand on your top hip and maybe finding if there's a tender spot on the highest point of your hip. Keep your hand there so you know it's not moving. And then use an exhale to bring your knee up just an inch and inhale back down and relax that outer hip. So you're activating on your exhale as your knee comes up and then relaxing in between. And you could do more or less, then rub that outer hip. If it feels good to do some circles, go ahead. If it doesn't feel good to do that, don't do it. Right. For me, I feel like I want to get a little stretch into that hip before moving to the other side. Right. And you can simply roll over to the other side. All right. Once we're set up, find that top highest point of your hip and keep your focus there. I always find a little tender spot. I'm not digging in, but I'm just keeping my focus there. That's where I'm going to squeeze to lift my knee just an inch and then release it back down and rest it. Like actively release it. And I'm using the exhale to lift. Now, if your whole pelvis is rocking back, it's probably because you're trying to bring your knee too high. So keep your lower legs relaxed and just really focus on this tiny movement. It doesn't have to be big and rest in between. So we're keeping our hips stacked, right? You can rub it. You might want to do a little stretch. This is also similar to a figure four, right? Or a reclined pigeon if you wanted to do that. Only if that feels good for you. And then finally, calves. So my favorite way to get into calves is using my opposite shin or knee and getting into the calf, releasing that. And I have found releasing my calves to be one of the best things for caring for my knees, actually. You can try turning your toes under, getting a toe stretch as well. We'll end there. Thanks.